Good morning. Wisdom comes with age. As we grow, we learn, and we use that experience to guide us on how to handle situations as they occur. Wisdom, for example, when there's a tornado warning or for a town, wisdom should be getting your family and pets down into the basement or storm shelter immediately. Foolish, we can go outside to look for the tornado, taking risk because it's not far away. Or maybe going out and looking for the tornado to film it. Wisdom can be you're packing for a long vacation with the family. Over the years, you gain wisdom about what to take, what not to take. You take your time and you pack to think of everything you need, rather than foolishness, which would be packing quick without thought, and then you end up forgetting something. Wisdom can be like the old Boy Scout motto, be prepared. When it comes to our faith and life, it is important to know on what we are building our faith on. What are we building our faith and lives on? Is it sand? Is it solid rock? Are we building our faith and lives on the desires of this world? Or is it on the teachings and commandments of God in Jesus Christ? Notably, on Jesus Christ we stand. During the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus speaks on many topics with his authority as God here on earth in the Son. Jesus, truly God, truly human. Jesus spoke about the Beatitudes, loving our enemies, not judging others, and many more. Jesus also taught us his final statement of those he spoke on during the Sermon on the Mount, which is Matthew 7, 24-28. And Jesus says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Now when Jesus had finished saying these words, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, not as their scribes. When I think of the authority, I think of law enforcement officers. They parole to make sure we follow the laws in the traffic zones. When we break the laws, they write a ticket to enforce the laws. But the Pharisees kind of acted like the police, without mercy, without thought of how they put burdens on people. See, the Pharisees didn't have the compassion or the mercy or the love that Jesus brought to teach, to share with us. Everyone who thinks that authority without mercy is good, it is not. But when we have grace, when we have compassion, we treat each other with respect. Those are things that Jesus brought to teach. And Jesus came as the Son of God to fulfill the law, not to abandon the law, to enhance the law, to make it better. If we remember the story of the woman who was caught in an act of adultery, and the religious authorities brought her to Jesus to test him, to see if they could bring a charge against Jesus. But instead, Jesus turned the tables on the religious leaders and the crowd, and said, "Whoever is without sin, cast the first stone." And one by one, they left, with only Jesus and the woman left. When Jesus taught, they were as if they had authority from above. And people recognized that who heard his message. Everyone who hears these words of mine, Jesus says, will be like a wise man. Jesus echoes a psalm David wrote, Psalm 111. Reverence for the Lord is the foundation of true wisdom. The rewards of wisdom come to all who obey him. The only way to become truly wise is to fear or revere God. Who is Jesus? God here on earth and the Son, Jesus Christ. Truly God, truly human. Jesus puts the crowds on notice as Jesus teaches with authority of God. Jesus, however, knew the law, but did the other teachers of the law, but he chose different words, different ways of interpreting. You've heard it say, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. When he taught with authority. So Jesus says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them in practice is like a wise man who built his house on rock. Building a house on solid rock takes planning, time, much chisel and work the rock so the foundation will be even as one. But the foolish man built his house on sand because it was quicker and easier. Yes, it was easy and quick to build on, but easy isn't always better. A rock foundation offers stability, security, whereas a sand foundation can be washed or blown away during a storm. My friends, storms will come. What are you standing on in the midst of the storms? What are we standing on in good times? The same solid rock. If a foolish person builds his house on sand, when the storms come, the sand will be washed and blown away, and the house will come crashing down. This passage is like some of Jesus' parables, that Jesus often uses figures of speech, metaphors, to make his points in which anyone could understand the teaching. To build on solid rock means to be hearing and responding disciples of Christ, the real McCoy disciples of Christ, not imitation, because it's about obedience to Jesus' commandments and teachings. Practicing obedience builds a solid rock foundation. Following Jesus' teachings and trying to be more like Jesus can be hard and difficult at times when we don't necessarily like our neighbor, trying to not be drawn into the foolish one's ideas. Like a house of cards, a fool's life crumbles. Most people are headed for destruction based on lack of thoughtfulness or just because it's simpler. Or they give in to the worldly desires like greed, wealth, power. but building on the solid foundation of God and Jesus Christ. So don't build a house of cards. Build a house on solid foundation and structure in your lives. Let the discipline and obedience that we take in and exhibit be our foundation in storms and good times. James 1:22-25 says, But the doers of the word, not merely hearers, who deceive themselves. For if there any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. For they look at themselves and on going away, immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. Building on a solid rock means putting into practice what Jesus has taught us and helping others to see the destructive path they are going down. Jesus is the solid rock foundation we can stand on, weather the storms in our lives, and let Jesus be our anchor in the storms. Following his commandments, his teachings, putting them into practice, is building our faith and lives on solid rock foundation. Let us go and build our lives in faith on solid rock. Amen.